Ladies and gentlemen, two key questions for today. Number one, does Singapore really have limited resources to carry out the policy that the opposition is moving towards? Secondly, will this opposition's policy necessarily breed a culture of dependency among citizens who receive aid? So now let me tackle the first question. Now, the fundamental premise of the proposition team is that, number one, the government does not have enough resources to actually carry out this policy and that it will weaken our economy. Now, considering that they haven't yet proven this assumption of theirs, we see that their entire point cannot stand until they have proven this, and they have given us no proof whatsoever. And not only that, my other speaker has already told you about how Singapore does have enough resources by citing you certain programs, such as the Work Assistance Program, the Public Assistance Scheme, and so on and so forth. And we say that Singapore has managed to do this thus far without incurring so much debt or so much burden upon the government, so we don't see why this trend would suddenly change in the future. So having dealt with that, let me move on to my second point of rebuttal on the whole idea of culture of dependency. Now, firstly, they have not tackled what is the definition of unemployment here. What I mean is this: does unemployment merely mean part-time employment, full-time employment, or other forms of employment? This is important because the degree of unemployment would therefore show how productive a person is after receiving aid from the government. If the guy is only part-time employed, then we see that the financial assistance will have no significant effect on these kind of people, and we say that these people are not the ones who need it most. Secondly, they have not proven the fact that having any sort of financial assistance, no matter how little, will actually cause them to go into a culture of dependency. We tell you that the maximum amount monthly that the public assistance schemes give to large families is $400 a month. That's not a high sum, and in fact, that's probably not enough to cause people to depend on the government for a living, because this is only the bare minimum standard of living here. So, and lastly, the fact that they're saying that they're trying to be pragmatic here. The team which is trying to be pragmatic here is actually the opposition, because we say we care about a key member of society, the involuntarily unemployed, which we will be talking about later. And we say that they have totally failed to ignore the government's responsibility towards these group of people, which I will be talking about later. So having dealt with the rebuttals for today, let me move on to explain my policy, or currently what Singapore is doing. We want to give financial assistance because, number one, the short-term aim is to help the poor make ends meet when they cannot do so. Second, in the form of cash grants and food, utility, or rental vouchers. Secondly, to enable them to be re-employed and find better work. This is the long-term aim, and this is something that we are also trying to tackle together with the proposition. This comes in the form of work assistance programs, like where they provide job placement schemes. The criteria for giving aid are as such: having low or no income, having low or no savings, especially if you are disabled or you are old. Hold on a moment, sir. And lastly, the fact that if you have more dependents, you'll be giving more money. What do you have to say to that, sir?
So your short-term schemes clearly reduce the incentives for unemployed workers, to take up your long-term schemes. So clearly they conflict.
Sir, considering that the work assistance program requires proof that you are actively seeking for work and that you have to turn up for retraining courses and all that, plus the fact that we are giving the bare minimum standard of living, we don't see how your assertion necessarily concludes that there will be a culture of dependency. So, as I've said, we are only providing for a minimum standard of living, and we're not going to discriminate against the unemployed or against the employed. We're saying we'll give aid to both if they need it, and we're only debating to remove the employment as a prerequisite for financial assistance. So our yardstick for today is that the government has a responsibility to serve the interests of both the country and its economy, as well as its citizens. Now, for substantive, I'll be talking about fulfilling the government's moral responsibility, while Nicholas here will be talking about how it affects potential immigrants. No, thank you, sir. So, the government's policy neglects one key group of people, as I've said, the involuntarily unemployed. So, this means they probably weren't prepared for the loss of income. For example, low-paid workers who barely live on very little savings. To find other work, they need time, but bills must be paid and families must be fed. And this is worse if they are made redundant when a company or an entire industry suffers.
Sir?
No, thank you, sir. If they don't have money to at least tide them through this period, they cannot even afford the basic necessities, let alone retrain. So are we going to let their families starve with them? We say no. But why does the government have a duty to help the involuntarily unemployed? You see, in Singapore's case, the government tries to focus on the collective benefit rather than the individual so that we can create more overall benefit. It does so by allowing people to get retrenched more easily because it has less laws protecting these people, and it limits the labor union's power, unlike in the United States. In fact, a recent example made by a United States think tank shows that Singapore has the highest job mobility rate in the entire world. but they do so at the cost of job security of these people and citizens' welfare as a whole. And so because Singapore chooses to adopt this path, we say that it has a moral responsibility to compensate citizens for the sacrifices, for having sacrificed them earlier. And one way to do this is to extend financial assistance to the unemployed. Why do we need to do so? As I've said, during this transition period, we can cover the expenses that they have so that they can retrain and therefore be more productive and as well as be able to help their families. So at the end of the day, we have achieved what our yardstick set out to do, that the government should carry out the responsibility that it has.